I'm Christopher Moore, and this is More or Less from Bangkok. Hearts and Minds. 14th February is Valentine's Day. On this day, for winning hearts, protesters remain in the streets of Bangkok. There has been another push from protest leaders to call the masses into the street to support their anti-government demonstrations. In war, politics, and love, winning the hearts and minds separates the victors from the vanquished. I find significance in the traditional word ordering of that phrase. Start with heart, and the mind will follow. This is straight from Hume and every modern psychologist led by Daniel Kahneman. If you can emotionally involve another person, the hard battle is won. The mind simply fills in the justification for the heart's decision. The hearts and minds drama is being played out in the streets of Bangkok. It also has a psych ops pattern worth exploring. If one were clever and devious enough, the best line of attack would be to undermine the populist programs of the government by turning the recipients of the populist programs against the government. Let's talk about Thailand's rice farmers. Any psych ops that would win the hearts of rice farmers might represent a political turning point. This becomes an interesting story. Here's a brief summary. The vast bulk of rice farmers live in the northeast and north of Thailand. They are loyal supporters of the government, and the government draws support from the so-called Reds. The Red movement is, at least in part, committed to representative democracy and elections. Since the election of Thaksin Shinawatra in 2001, rice farmers have delivered their votes in supermajorities for members of his political party. Their current political turmoil finds his sister, Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra, who led her party to the polls on 2nd February and who has faced months of unrest led by ex-MPs of the Democratic Party who resigned and took to the streets to lead protesters to bring down the government. The protesters have used various means in their struggle. Block roads, cut electricity and water to government offices, block polling stations, arrested and beat up people, threatened kidnapping of the Prime Minister's son. 10 people have been killed and hundreds injured in violent incidents related to the anti-government protest. The protest leaders have shifted their reason for attacking the government from an ill-conceived amnesty bill and the allegedly illegal attempts to amend the Constitution. The government wanted a fully elected as opposed to a half-elected, half-appointed Senate, and the usual standby corruption. The leaders have had their bank accounts frozen by a government agency. They've marched around Bangkok gathering donations to support their protest. So far, the protesters, looking at the dwindling numbers in the streets, sometimes a handful, are not winning hearts and minds. But they have a new idea. Having effectively reduced the authority of the caretaker government, it isn't surprising problems are now arising, such as payments which are now due to rice farmers under a controversial rice subsidy scheme. By all accounts, this program is riddled with problems, including allegations of mismanagement and corruption. The protesters, having closed down the ability of the government to pay the farmers, now blames the government for failing to deliver the payments. The protesters have powerful allies. The National Anti-Corruption Commission is expected to bring formal charges against the caretaker Prime Minister for her role in the rice pledging scheme. The message is spread that this heartless government you voted for is letting you down. They created a bad program. The English language newspapers, which are heavily anti-government, run stories of rice farmers committing suicide over money worries. They show a few hundred rice farmers who've come to Bangkok to complain to the government. The protesters have a new message that goes along these lines. Democracy isn't your friend. Your friends pay you. This government is a false friend. Voting and democracy are unreliable. They cheat you. If your heart is in democracy, you will only be disappointed. Join us. Sing with us. Come to our picnics and nightly concerts. Happy Valentine's Day. Rice farmer, we love you. Wait for the new t-shirts we've ordered. Even though we called you water buffalo and said you were stupid last month, well, that was last month. Forget about that. This month, we are your friend and your savior. In fact, the objective appears to be an old-fashioned psych ops plan to sow seeds of discontent and doubt in the hearts of rice farmers. It's a cynical ploy, but brilliant at the same time. And given the track record of Bangkok elites caring about the heart of rice farmers, the chances are high it won't work. Still, the pitch is being made that if the rice farmers would only return to traditional Thai values, their betters in Bangkok will take care of them, just like they always have. People in Bangkok have given 10 or 20 million baht in cash handouts to the protest leader, who then, as the big face man, will pass these along to grateful rice farmers. That's a photo op anyone heading a psych op will frame and put in his or her office wall. There are several problems with this approach. It assumes the rice farmers can't see through the end game, which is to discredit populist programs and the government that sponsors populist programs. At the heart of this Valentine's Day message from the demonstration in the streets is one that the protesters and their allies are the only ones with a true heart. Given the outstanding amount owed under the rice subsidy scheme to the rice farmers, which is in the billions, the donations in Bangkok handed to a protest leader are a rounding off error. In the larger scheme of this mountain of debt, doesn't matter. What does matter is this coded message, sent over the heads of the democratically elected government to their main rural constituency, that continues to return them to office no matter how many times the elites ban their party and leaders, is that democracy lacks traditional Thai heart. Walk away from democracy like you walk away from an abusive lover. That's true Thai heart is found in the ancient concept of Grenjai, where the good people aren't elected, a concept that of course can't go very wrong, but are known by their rank, position, name, and status. They decide what is right, moral, fair, and just. Trust them. Trust their heart. Their Namjai water heart. They have shown their good intentions by collecting donations for them. Has the government ever done that? Here's their story. Heartless government, overflowing heart of protesters. The battle of hearts and minds of Thailand's rural voters will continue. The idea is these donations to rice farmers will pay several dividends. The rice farmers are expected to return a respectful Y of gratitude for the handout, and more importantly, will turn their back on the unreliable government and their philosophy of democracy. It remains to be seen whether this will happen. I suspect there are very few people who labor in rice fields of the north and northeast are betting the farm on the protesters looking after their long-term interests. The seeds of democracy have been planted and yielded too many good crops for the supporters to return to the days of waiting for a coin to be dropped in their rice bowl. Happy Valentine's Day from Bangkok. This is Christopher G. Moore or less from Bangkok.